Don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things. This is Gary, and of course you are watching my vlog. 3, 2, 1. Off you go. As you may know, I've been working on this chapter 10 for about a month now, and there's been some changes, tweaked it a little bit. And I know, I've covered chapter 10 already with my first vlog, but I finally got all the hopefully I got all the kinks out. You know, of course, not the most perfect writer, but I feel like I got the majority of what I wanted to get out. Definitely finished the chapter, all typed up, and it's all ready to go. But honestly, enough of me blabbing. I now introduce a reading.
The buggy was parked off the right side of the road, out of the way of traffic that wasn't really there. It spoke to their courtesy and how considerate 4 out of the 5 members of the group were. The horizon far away included mountain peaks that covered the buggy in shade as the sun slowly crawled out of the night. While in the darkness, the only contrast was a solitary fire fanned by Benjamin. He squatted down and blew lightly while he held a straw fan gifted from Caroline. His other hand was placed on his knee to keep balance. It was quite a sight to see, a large body hunkered down and gingerly kindling a fire. Hanging on a wire was a small kettle, steam escaping from the sprout. There was a pleasure to the pause of peace in this scene. The wood crackling in the fire, the water bubbling as it gurgled along, the little chill in the morning air that caressed his skin, a true balance and serenity. Benjamin even took comfort in the crickets playing their final song before the sun was fully awake. Had the events of last night occurred, this would have been the beginning of another day and a road trip with his best friends. But because last night happened, he hadn't been able to sleep. From the lack of snoring, it also seemed like everyone else had the same problem. It had been a long time since he was shoved down and defeated so soundly like that. The fact that Anubis called Benjamin what he was without regard poured acid on the wound. The steady crackling and heat from the fire allowed his mind to drift and wander. He fantasized his revenge when or if he ever got a chance to get his hands on Anubis. Ben stared at the flames as the kettle started to whistle out due to the increasing temperature. It was white noise that seemingly fit his slowly slipping temper. The crescendo of the high tone brought him back to the present. He was in the middle of nowhere, traveling alongside people he wasn't familiar with, nursing wounds to his ego, and all he wanted to accomplish right now was to have a hot cup of coffee and talk about what was to come next. The group sat around close to the buggy. The fire had been trampled out, and the removable tarp on the buggy's roof provided the only shade from the energized sun. The mechanic was still unconscious and sprawled out along the back seat. "Thanks again for the coffee, Ben." Marie lifted her cup and gave him a warm smile. Her tone had no hint of residual effects from the events of last night. "No trouble at all," Ben responded with a similar jovial tone. Perhaps it was a soft spot he had for Marie, but his voice had no trace of anxiety regarding Anubis. Joseph cleared his throat and took no sip from his cup. "About the Hecate. You mentioned that you'd tell us more." Ben sighed and nodded his head. He could feel the anticipation in Joseph's voice. Setting his cup down, he pushed his palms together and rested his chin on the index and middle fingers. "Yes, the Hecate," he started. "I had hoped they'd remain calibrating or whatever Anubis said." "Who are they?" Joseph pulled back his inquisitive tone. "They are also known as the Cult of the Moon. They don't seem to enjoy that distinction. You've all heard the story of why the moon is scarred, yes? As a kid, I remember it being told of a hunter who struck the surface of the moon believing it to be a white rabbit," Joseph responded. "That's funny. I heard a different story," Marie interjected. I heard that it was because of the two lovers separated by their fathers. I think the woman paces back and forth for eternity until her love returns. Sad story. In the research I read, experts believe a series of strikes from loose debris caused the damage. One or two of those asteroids might have even struck the planet, Albert added. Interesting takes, Benjamin replied. As far as the cult is concerned, they believe that the scar is proof of Stigma Moon's power. Stigma Moon? Joseph wondered. He is their ideal of a perfect being. Born a mortal man, he sacrifices humanity to attain ultimate power. He's held up as an example of limitless potentials for which the cult tries to achieve. Do they want to resurrect him? Marie chimed in. Stigma Moon is merely a myth. Instead, they elect pharaohs who all have the idea that they can take on the mantle of the myth, but... Ben stopped for a moment. The group noticed this and were waiting for him to finish his thought. Taking a deep breath, the decision was made to let down one layer of his walls. We've been fighting them for a long time, at least those before me. I've yet to encounter anyone from the cult, aside from last night. The inevitable question flowed out from Joseph. Who's we? I suppose it's time for me to be more honest. What Anubis called me last night was accurate. I am a demigod. No one spoke as they itched for more details. Their silence asked them to elaborate. A demigod is a denizen of the higher realm. We try to keep a low profile most of the time, but at a certain age, every demigod is sent out to live among the people. They can only return when they've accomplished something of note, and it's only then they receive their infused weapon. I'll tell you more, but do you gain new abilities with that weapon? How long have you been away from home? Where is this higher realm? Albert inquired. Ben sighed and remembered why he kept those details to himself. Perhaps we should focus on something more pressing, like what the heck its relation to the cloud could be. If they've been underground for all that time, I don't doubt that we'll be running into more of their agents sooner rather than later, Joseph mused. Marie raised her hand and the group looked confused. Ben pointed at her and she looked satisfied. What exactly are we going to do when we make it to the destination you told us about? How are we getting inside the cloud?
Ooh, we got some real developments happening here. I'm really happy with how it's turning out for sure. And it all is a matter of just hammering it out, gnashing it out, really getting in there and really, I'm not saying being overly critical of yourself, but don't be afraid to really get in there and edit. I think my number one tip that I could share to you folks is whenever you write something, with this whole experience, it taught me that recording yourself and listening back and having to, because with the microphone here, it has a headphone jack for me to listen so I can hear myself as I record. And what's crazy is I could hear all the mistakes and the spots and writing that was in there, and I edited on the go, if you will. So I highly recommend recording yourself and just reading your stuff out loud. It's probably the best way you can catch all the errors yourself as far as structure and flow of your story. But pretty much hire an editor if you can get one. But before you even do all that, edit first before you send it off to be edited. Thank you again for watching, of course. So just remember, have a good night, stay safe, and just write.